Hey there, it's Tyler, and today we're going to be teaching an AI to fight a dragon. Just to give you an idea of how the game works, on screen at the moment is actually me playing the game. It's a pretty simple game really, you basically just avoid the fireballs and try and survive as long as you can. The longer you survive for, the further this bar along the top of the screen will progress, and every time you enter a new section, it means you've just entered a new level of difficulty. The first level of difficulty is fairly simple, only a few fireballs are shot out every time the dragon turns around. However, in the last level of difficulty, it's pretty much complete chaos and the screen is basically filled with fire. The score at the top of the screen gives a rough idea of how long you've been alive. Myself and a few others have played the game and most attempts seem to end up with around a score of 60. However, after a fair while of playing, most people seem to be able to get a higher score of around 90 to 100. So after spending a while playing this game, what's on screen now is actually my current record of 107. Once I get an AI up and running and playing this game, if it's able to beat that score, that's pretty much superhuman performance, or at least super me performance anyway. So I'm calling it there, 107 is the score to beat. So as you can see from this record, at the later stages of the game, it gets pretty manic. So I'm not really sure what I'm expecting an AI to get, but if it gets over a score of about 70, I'll be pretty impressed, and if it gets a score of about 90, I'll be absolutely delighted. But I guess I'll just have to wait and find out. So young Jimmy here is born, and you can probably tell he has absolutely no idea what's going on. He doesn't know what platforms are, what fire is, what dragons are, or even what his own character is, which is pretty sad. At the moment he's just trying completely random actions, which is basically just like mashing the controller like a 6-year-old me playing Super Smash Bros, and hoping that eventually he'll do something cool and that it might actually work. And while 6-year-old me was clearly a very good Smash Bros player, I have a feeling there might be a different strategy required for this game. So this clip's about an hour after the last clip, and it's pretty clear to see he hasn't made that much progress yet. I was kind of expecting this due to the input that the AI is using for the game. And this input is exactly what you and I see, the raw pixels for the game itself. Although this is very good because it allows him to have a full view of the game, it's also a pretty daunting task for someone who's never seen anything that's on the screen before, so he's probably going to take his time. So for Jimmy's adventures, I'm only going to be using fairly specific clips and probably speeding some of the clips up. This is because this AI is likely to take days instead of hours to train, and I highly doubt that days and days of footage makes highly riveting YouTube content. So the way this AI is taught is actually pretty simple. He basically just gets a small reward every second he's alive, and a big negative reward every time he dies, also known as a punishment. After getting burnt to a crisp a few thousand times, we're going to hope that he eventually learns that fireballs are really not fun, and that he should probably try and avoid them. So I'm not going to get too in depth about the underlying learning algorithm, since this would probably take me days to explain, but for those who are interested, it's called dueling double deep Q learning, which is a really powerful algorithm for solving games and all sorts of other problems. So we're about 12 hours into training now, and I think it's going pretty well, since Jimmy's getting scores of over 60 now, which is actually really hard in this game. Not to mention, we can clearly see that Jimmy actually has a strategy, since he's definitely standing in places that have less fireballs a lot more, and he's also actually making an attempt to dodge fireballs, which is usually a good sign. So as much as I'd like to say that this was the first and only Jimmy, sadly it actually took many Jimmys to get to this point. Many of the other versions of this AI that I made didn't learn at all, and this is probably about Jimmy number 20. But as this one's actually showing some decent signs of making progress, I'm hoping this should be the last Jimmy. So the main difference between this AI and the AI from my car driving video is that this AI uses what's called a convolutional neural network. Since this AI uses an image as input, it uses what's called convolutional layers to try and understand the image. This basically allows it to detect things like edges and identify objects and all that stuff, so that it can actually get an understanding of what's going on in the image. So I'm now going to show some sped up clips of the next 2 days of training, and yes, I did train this for another entire 2 days, so my computer is probably very tired. However, over this time the AI should have learned some new stuff, so hopefully we can see some clear improvements from all that training. So after many long, hard days of training, something happened. Something worse than I could ever have imagined. My score of 107, which once seemed untouchable and perfect, now seemed endangered, and Jimmy was having none of it. But I wasn't done yet. There was no way I could allow my AI to take my record. I could not be dethroned by my own creation at my own game. It was just too much. So I decided I'd play tirelessly for hours until I had reclaimed my record, which was rightfully mine. So I had done it. I had worked tirelessly to reclaim my record from Jimmy, but Jimmy would not stop there. Whilst I had worked for hours, he would work for days, whatever it took to prove his silicon superiority over such biological beings. He was not done yet. No, how could this happen? To be beaten at my own game. I can't believe it. The battle is over. After hours and hours of playing, the war is lost. Phew, so I'm glad that's over. That was way too dramatic for me. But it is true, I did generally get outclassed at my own game, which I'm still not happy about. So despite this, I am very proud of Jimmy, since he honestly did better than I ever thought he would. Even though it did take him nearly 3 days to do that record, it was still such a good record that I think it was worth it. So here's some footage from the last few minutes of Jimmy's life. And after days of training, I finally decided to give my computer a rest, as it's been working very hard over the last few days and generally sounds like it's about to take off. Oh wow, my room is so quiet now. Maybe I can finally sleep without thinking a bomb's about to go off. So now that Jimmy has finally been laid to rest, here you can see the graph of his progress over his entire time spent playing. As you can see, it was actually a very smooth graph. He pretty much just gradually increased for a very long time, and there was only really some variation in the end, which isn't that bad. So while looking at this graph, you may have noticed that the x-axis is actually recorded in millions of frames played, and he played a total of over 7 million frames. In number of games played, this roughly translates to around 10,000 games played, which is a fair bit of experience to say the least. So that's all for Jimmy's adventure today. Hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff, and anyway, see ya!